Okay, so I'm set up on the paper cutter back here because if you can see where I printed my photo, I have these white margins. Because these margins are not the same length and width on either side, if I use them, it's going to distort my grid, which I don't want. So I'm gonna trim those edges really nice and tight before I start my next step. So anytime you use this paper cutter back here, you are going to always put your paper all the way up against this black yardstick back here. If you keep it out in no man's land, it could slant without you noticing it, and then you make a cut that is not straight. The blade also has the best amount of contact right here, so that's where we want to do it. So I am going to do my short side first because that's what I'll have the most control over for this first cut. I'm going to look at this back edge right here, try and make sure it's exactly lined up. I'm going to reference that with my front edge right here. And now I'm noticing in this moment that it actually printed crooked, which is not ideal. But what I'm gonna do actually, instead of using this is the only time I will ever go against this rule if I notice that something is printed crooked. I'm gonna actually tilt my image slightly and try and cut exactly along my image because I think that that will end up giving me a square image. I went almost to the image. I'm gonna scoot it over just a tiny bit. Anytime I'm making a really detailed cut, I'm going to kind of slightly push the blade in as I pull it down so that it gets full contact. There we go, okay. Not ideal, but we're doing it. Okay, then I'm gonna see here. Again, I can't use that edge guard, which is irksome. I'm so used to using that. That was a pretty perfect cut though. Then I'm gonna come over here. It's easier so I can see it on that side. Since I've cut it over there, I'm gonna try and line it up over here. Taking my time to do it right. And last cut. Easiest and that I can line up both edges. Straight line between 2 points. Okay, beautiful. So now I have my image cut. The next thing that you are going to do is lots and lots of folding. So I'm gonna maybe situate this perfectly to the side, angle it down a little bit, and work right here. Okay, so for your folding, the way that makes sense for me to grid is not so much measuring out 1 inch, 2 inch, 3/4 inch, but to make it so that it is always in half and in half and in half. So that's what we're gonna do here. I'm gonna start by just doing hamburger and hot dog fold. And again, like cutting, I'm gonna take the time to really make this as precise as possible. So I'm gonna line up my corners, kind of pinch down to this edge, pinch it down a little lightly, and then I'm gonna come over to this corner, line that up, slide it over, pinch it, and then I'm gonna try and do that on both sides, in the middle, and crease, and try and make that as precise as possible. If I check it and it seems good, then I can come in and really crease it with my fingernail, and then unfold, and I have my first fold. If I wanna really make sure it's good and visible, I could go the other side, fingernail it, and then there's a nice crease right there. So I'm gonna do that, hamburger and hot dog. I do think that maybe it just printed a little distorted, which is a bummer. But I'm gonna try and split the differences and make it as precise as I can. Working with what I got. So I have it in half and in half. The next thing I'm gonna do is go from the edge into the middle. So maybe it's easier to see on this side. From the edge into the middle. I'm gonna go from the edge into the middle, and then I'm gonna flip it and do the same thing on this side. Edge into the middle, edge into the middle, okay? So I'm gonna start in from this side, edge right into that seam, trying to line up my midline here and my midline there. Lining up my midline, making sure it's as even as it can be. Ta-da, unfold, Okay, so now this, if you've done a French fold zine, this is how you start a French fold zine. Then you would just cut right here and then you would have a zine format. Amazing. But we're not going to stop there. We are going to come in from the outside, hot dog style, into the middle here. Do you hear me pause every time just to make sure I'm saying the right one? Okay, I'm going to crease that. I always flip it around, so I'm always working with my most dominant hand, trying to make sure I get as precise as possible. Okay. Okay, so if you were to do a pretty small piece that's not that detailed, this might be enough grids to start with. However, it's probably not for most of us doing these big pieces. So what we're gonna do now is go from the outside into that fold we just made on all the edges. So our boxes are gonna start getting smaller. Again, if you get your grid off, it's really hard to make sense of your drawing. So taking the time to go slowly, not rushing, but making sure your folds are super precise. Creasing them for good measure. Got those, I'm gonna do these. Okay, so now if you look at this unfolded, you have little squares all the way around the perimeter in these two corners, but then you have a gap in here and a gap in here. So we need to figure out how to make those folds. You can probably just take your paper, move it over and see about where you think you're gonna need to do it. For this, you're going to be going into the fold you made right here. So it's a little hard, I don't have like a clear word, but shy 2 boxes, basically. So you're gonna go in 2/3, or wait, 3/4. 3/4 of the way in to leave 2 boxes on the outside. Make that crease. And then from the other side, going in 3/4, so there's 2 boxes on the outside, making that crease. Okay, and then we're left with just these 2 to make. So I'm gonna go from the outside, in 3/4, there's 2 boxes. Crease it. Same deal. For our last fold, making sure it's good. Okay, and there we go. We have your gridded image. Look at that. So you can take it 1 box at a time. And if you don't want to look at the whole thing because it gets overwhelming, you can just not look at the whole thing and let it be less overwhelming. You can even do that and look at only that and put pieces of paper over that. You can fold it however you need to isolate the image so that you are drawing and painting what you see instead of what you think you see. This is a really great way to do it. Okay, so you've done your grid. Congratulations.